While FC Barcelona was busy yesterday with that goal fest against Real Betis, the greatest player and Barcelona's greatest player of all time in Lionel Messi was winning his first MLS Cup and continuing to build on a legacy that most Kool-Aids are going to follow until the day he hangs up his boots. I usually don't stray too far from FC Barcelona stuff, but the retirement of Sergio Busquets and Jordi Alba, two more Barcelona all-timers, plus Luis Suarez and Javier Mascherano being involved, that feels too Barca-coded not to care. Also, for those in the know, I do some work for MLS, so I was covering the MLS Cup yesterday, which is why the Real Betis 5 headlines was delayed and all that different stuff. So this is an area of both expertise and care for me outside of the Barcelona podcast universe. Which, speaking of, welcome to episode 758 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am Dan Hilton. And as always, I want to remind you, please subscribe to the YouTube channel because while I'm taking this quick jump outside of FC Barcelona's universe, we'll be right back in it in, 12 hours or something with the preview for Eintracht Frankfurt. That's coming up for the Tuesday match in the Champions League against Eintracht Frankfurt. They're at home at the Camp Nou. And for that one, of course, I will have the watch along during the match on BigUp.com. So please join me over there, become a member for free. And as I said again, subscribe to the YouTube channel, help me out on Patreon, the merch store, all that good stuff. And yeah, let's dive in now to 5 headlines that are not related to FC Barcelona, but 5 headlines from the MLS Cup where we get to talk about all things, Barcelona's past. Headline 1 is Messi is football's winner. Lionel Messi is the greatest eye test that has ever existed in the history of football. The way the man moves with the ball and the way the ball leaves his feet, whether to find the back of the net or a teammate, that is the peak of football aesthetics. He is what any fan with 2 eyes means when they say the eye test. But yet, the greatest testament to Messi's greatness might just be the amount of winning he has done. Yes, the Ballon d'Or somewhat legitimize his greatness individually, but we all know team trophies better define a player's legacy, as unfair as that may be. MLS Cup was the 48th title in his professional career, and if you weren't following MLS week to week, then you would have thought that, it's Messi and all these other stars, that the MLS Cup was going to be guaranteed for them. But that was hardly the case. Vancouver had already beaten Inter Miami twice in the regular season, and they outplayed them for large stretches in that final too. But Messi is Messi, from the smallest friendly to a World Cup final, and so he was the architect of all 3 goals, picking up 2 assists in the process. And as much as we can make it about his brilliance, there was a method to the madness of surrounding him in Miami with family and friends. Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, and Rodrigo de Paul all played major roles in the final, de Paul scoring a goal, while Luis Suarez has found himself on the bench since getting suspended a few weeks ago and rightly losing his spot to younger players that can do more of the legwork around the Argentine 10. Plus the man who led them from the sidelines, Javier Mascherano, he was the figure tasked with combining authority and camaraderie, and a strong relationship with Messi helped him and gave him the power to do so. And if somehow you found this from MLS perspective outside of Inter Miami, yes, of course, there are ways at times that it feels like MLS has catered to the world's second most popular athlete on social media, behind, of course, Cristiano Ronaldo, and you would also argue there are ways Inter Miami cater to him. But as Messi taught us at Barcelona, he will reward loyalty, and he isn't the type of personality to create division. There may still be beef between him and the board of Barcelona for how he left, but the fact that that beef is only in whispers and subtle IG posts tells you that one of the most popular sports figures on the planet doesn't like to burn bridges, at least not all the way down to the beams, and he doesn't like to do it in public. Headline 2 is double posts. For those of you who just looked at the 3-1 scoreline, you might think that Messi and company danced their way to the MLS Cup, but that's just not how it happened. At 1-1 in the game, after the Whitecaps had scored an own goal in the 8th minute and Ali Ahmed of Vancouver equalized in the 60th, just 2 minutes later, Vancouver's Emmanuel Sabi hit 3 posts, 2 inside posts and 1 outside, and that game could have been flipped in the opposite direction before any Miami player could put the ball in the net themselves. Instead, Miami lived to fight another day, which meant that Messi lived to get more chances, and he did so just 9 minutes after that, feeding Rodrigo de Paul for Inter Miami's eventual game winner. Late in the game, Vancouver still had life, but a chip from Messi to Tadeo Allende in deep stoppage time sealed the game. The Whitecaps were the best of the Western Conference had to offer after San Diego FC fell earlier in the playoffs, and they are a good quality MLS side. They don't have names that you'll be hearing regularly at the World Cup. Andreas Kubas will play with Paraguay, Ali Ahmed might go with Canada, and Ryan Gould is a long shot for Scotland, along with Brian White, Sebastian Berhalter, and Tristan Blackman for the U.S. Vancouver might not have household names, but they are a team over the course of this season in MLS that under Jesper Sorensen would have deserved to be holding that trophy at the end. Headline 3 is Busquets and Alba's perfect goodbye. Instead of me, I'm going to actually let their great friend in Lionel Messi, I'm going to let his words do the speaking of those great Spaniards. Given what they've been as players, both were among the greatest in history, each in his position with the careers they had and the titles they won. It's wonderful that they can retire with this MLS title. I don't think they're fully aware yet of what they're experiencing, of what it means to retire. Today, something very beautiful ends for them, something to which they dedicated their whole lives. Now a new life begins for them. I wish them the very best because they are two friends I care for deeply. I'm happy they can leave with this title. And the best thing I can say about Busquets and Alba leaving, and leaving in the way that they are, is this does feel like the best time for them to go. As much as many times throughout the season, I would watch them play and say, wow, those guys, they have a lot left to give. There were many moments, even in this final, that tell you that this was actually the perfect time to go. There were moments when Vancouver turned Miami over in their own third, and Busquets was not the outlet he's always been to help the back line get out of trouble. And for all the great moments of Alba's offensive quality, there is a reason why Emmanuel Sabi, Vancouver's right winger, was so dangerous throughout this contest. Knowing when to say goodbye is arguably the hardest thing for any athlete to do because every athlete has their own reasons. Family, money, body, motivation, legacy, all of these and more play a factor in each athlete's decision to keep going or call it quits. You feel for the ones that don't get to make that choice because so rarely do athletes get to go out on their own terms and do it as winners. The fact that two of Barcelona's all-time greats and all-time greats of the game got to go out on their own merits, that is, yes, a little bit sad, but it is a beautiful thing in sport. Headline 4 is doing against Thomas Müller. I did mention a ton of Vancouver Whitecaps players, but I purposely left out a midseason pickup and talismanic figure now for the Vancouver Whitecaps in Thomas Müller. He is a career winner as well. The German hates to lose and is always willing to revel in a good victory in the media. His post-game comments about the referee being brought into arguments, one of the features of many Miami games this season that could have turned them off to neutrals, that did have some honesty in it. He also talked about the unlucky posts and some of the unlucky moments for Vancouver in this game, and he was absolutely right about that too. But with that salt, he did also speak to the greatness of the opposing players and spoke about them the way that other legends are supposed to speak. Everybody played nice, but you don't know ball if you think that Busquets, Alba, Messi, they didn't have that 8-2 from 5 years ago in the back of their heads when they were heading into this match. Yes, it's two different clubs. Yes, it's thousands of miles away. And yes, it's 5 years later, but revenge is still revenge. Then headline 5 is ends and beginnings. As I've said, the title for Inter Miami was never guaranteed. And now it does close the book on a few chapters and begins in a lot of different ways a new era for Inter Miami. For starters, Alba and Busquets will need to be replaced somehow. They may have looked at times like geriatrics, but they still started the final for a reason. DePaul is the kind of talent that Miami will be ambitious to try to bring in more of, but for all the critics saying that Miami are getting special treatment and there are special rules to them, there is still a salary limit in place, and you can't just buy, if you're into Miami, an upgrade at every position. Miami will also very, very likely be saying goodbye to Luis Suarez, too, Barcelona's third all-time goal scorer. He never saw the field in the final, but you'd be crazy not to think his personality was missing from this team. He will likely be heading back to Uruguay to hang up his boots with hometown Nacional, but we'll see what happens in the coming weeks as that news will trickle in. Even the venue, Chase Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, is saying goodbye to Inter Miami. And as I said, they're just saying goodbye to Inter Miami as a temporary tenant, not saying goodbye. I guess that's a better way of saying that. Miami Freedom Park will open next year as a stadium designed for Inter Miami CF. As is the case with MLS teams, it's hard to know who will be actually on that squad when it opens up. Young players around the league are so often either sold or on loan, and those are marks of a healthy and growing league. Two major attacking pieces, Tadeo Allende, who scored Miami's third goal, he is on loan from Celta de Vigo. After a 20-goal campaign, this could be the jumping-off point for the 26-year-old's career. Matteo Salvetti is only 19 and just arrived from Messi's boyhood club, Newell's Old Boys, in 2025, so he should be expected to be around for a little bit now. The most promising Miami youngster of the last few seasons wasn't even in the same continent for the final, as 20-year-old Benjamin Cramashi is on loan at Parma in Italy and struggling for minutes, so we'll have to see where his future lies after what is largely going to be likely an unsuccessful loan. But as far as ends and beginnings, the biggest questions always seem to come back to Lionel Messi. Like the big one I have is what comes next for him. He's conquered all of Leagues Cup, Supporters Shield, and MLS Cup in the US, so yes, you can kind of say that he conquered North America too, just like he did in Europe. With the World Cup this summer, what else is left on his to-do list? We hear it's a no for him to ever wear Blaugrana as a player again, but things change fast in football, and I wonder if winning MLS Cup changes that for him. And if it does, would the Liga even allow it? There are so many questions, and if anything, winning MLS Cup gives me more questions about Messi than answers. Messi is where we started, and Messi is where we end. The man does not just win trophies, he inspires, and he is what ends eras. He creates discussions about greatness, legacy, and the romance of football. Messi always belongs to Barcelona. He just said as much a few weeks ago at the Camp Nou, but Kool-Aids will also belong in his world too, which is why I decided to do a show like this. And also why I will never stop talking, at least until he hangs his boots up, talking about Lionel Messi. Which this conversation can continue if you do join me on Tuesday for the watch along on BigUp.com for Eintracht Frankfurt in the Champions League. That's back to FC Barcelona and all that stuff. So I will see you there. I'll leave you for now. And as always, Forza Barca.